Hardcore for queer kids is right. This album packs a punch that is both modern and reminiscent of post-hardcore metalcore old. So why don't we just roll the intro and get right on into it?
What's up, you fucking fat? We're SeeYouSpaceCowboy from Southern California with love.
Immediately off the bat with track 1, allow us to set the scene.
Depraved as our concrete backdrop.
This track opens with a beautiful, beautiful feature from Iris. Iris is an artist that I will cover myself eventually because they are amazing. But back to this album. The opening reminiscent of cabaret, big band, and slam poetry. That leads into the heaviest switch up in the album with Tiny's brutal screams and spoken vocals being interchanged throughout the second half of the song, with a brutal breakdown to end off with more spoken vocals. To say this track set the scene would be an understatement. 9 out of 10. As we delve into track 2, Subtle Whispers to Take Your Breath Away. Unfortunately, this track I don't have much to say about. It's honestly just a very solid metalcore track that has its catchy points and not so catchy points, but unfortunately I don't have much to say. Other than it's just very solid. And this is the first 7.5 out of 10 of the album. And as we delve into track 3 and the two slipped into the shadows, this track brings us back to the more sinister sound that I'm used to from this band. With a semi breakdown that bends around a minute 40, only to lead into vocals from Ethan Taylor that are briefly intertwined with Tiny screaming, from Mind Out to end off the track. This track is a solid 8 out of 10. As we get into track 4, this is one of the singles for the album, Red Wine and Discontent. It's one of the weaker songs in the album, in my opinion. It's not bad, it's not amazing, it's just kind of okay, honestly. It's just okay. And with that, I say a solid 7.5 out of 10. However, as we get into track 5, Lubricant Like Kerosene. This is where the album starts to pick up very, very much. This track features Kim Dracula. Now, if you don't know who Kim Dracula is, you are in for a party. This guy is a weirdo. And that's coming from me, and I'm weird. He makes me look normal. And as bizarre and weird as he is, he melds with his band to an insane degree. But what does that translate to a track? It doesn't disappoint. This track feels like something that could have been on their prior album, The Romance of Affliction. That's not a bad thing. That album's amazing. It has that same energy. And one of the clever things in the track is around minute 45, there's a stop. Just a stop. Just for fun, I guess. There's just a stop. And as the track went on, I started to wonder, where would Kim Dracula be in the song? Would he come in his typical bizarro fashion, or would it be heavy? And as we got into the last third of the song, I got my answer. It's heavy. And to say that it's a fun track with him and Connie screaming, 8.5 out of 10. Tracks 6 and 7 I will put together as that's how they were put together originally when they were released. Respite for the tragic tales / silhouettes in motion.
A fruitful resolution was just to tease.
This is the second appearance of Iris on the album. These vocals are very reminiscent of big band cabaret vibes. They are amazing, and they fit to a T with this album. And as the first half of the song ends, with clapping that leads into the second half, so smartly done. But just because something is smartly done does not mean it is good. Is it good? Oh, it's good. Very, very, very good. Now, as you lead to the second half, Silhouette's Emotion, this is when I first started to get very excited for this album. The first two singles, while very good, the first two singles will be talked about very soon. This is what got me excited for the album. With the aforementioned clapping at the end of Respite leading into Silhouettes, and the lead in the Connie's vocals, who has consistently put out a very solid vocal performance this album. She is brilliant. That led into the duet between Ethan and Taylor. And they cannot be understated throughout this album. They have put out solid vocal work the entire album. However, it wouldn't be a SeeYouSpaceCowboy song without a breakdown, would it? And the breakdown on this album, throughout this album, and the song especially, very, very solid. And it gives very, very much old school vibes of early metalcore. And it makes me very happy. This album would not be as good without this song. 9.5 out of 10. However, we get to track 8. This is another single from the album. And it features Courtney LaPlante. From Spirit Box, and formerly I Wrestled the Bear Once. We won't get into that one. I was wondering why there was a feature of her on the album, but after some research, it makes sense. Courtney is a fan of this band. And as we get into the track itself, does that translate into a good song? Yes. Yes, it does. This song is really good. And the ending with Courtney is very atmospheric, only to lead into one of the heaviest parts of the album, with Courtney and Connie both screaming at the same time. And that is enough to give this a solid 8 out of 10. It's not as good as the prior tracks, technically one track, two tracks separated, but it is one of the better songs on the album. Now, leading into track 9, Rhythm and Rapture, which was the second single for the album. It features Nothing Nowhere, who I know of because SeeYouSpaceCowboy was featured on Nothing Nowhere's last album. And honestly, this is a fun track. And it has a very old dancey vibe, but modernized with its heaviness. And even his feature is honestly, very subtle. You'd probably miss it if you weren't listening or didn't know his voice. That's how subtle it is. And honestly, this is not the best song on the album, unfortunately, but it's still a solid 7.5 out of 10. But that unfortunately cannot be said about track 10, Sister with a Gun. Now, this is probably the most out of place song on the album. It feels like it's from a completely different band, honestly. It feels like a pop punk band's B-side from an EP from like 2002 with but only to throw in a very good breakdown at the halfway point. It's a very bizarre track. But then the breakdown just leads into the very pop punk vocals. It's honestly the worst track on the album. It's only a 7 out of 10. Which doesn't mean it's bad, but it just means it's very weird. However, I'm not going to say much about the next track, Chewing the Scenery, which is track 11, because this song has been out for like half a year, over half a year at this point, and I don't want to bore you because you probably already know what everyone's opinion on it is. It's good. It's really good, actually, but I'm not going to say much about it because everyone's heard it like 1,000 times. 8.5 out of 10 for being a really good first single and having the heaviest breakdown on the album. And here we go, the last track on the album, Curtain Call.
Once the buildings stop burning down.
Honestly, it's a solid ending track and very melancholy and down-tempo and slow. Only to pick up, but just to end with the same melancholy slow part that was in the intro. And the album ends with Adieu from Iris at the end. 8 out of 10 for this track. And the review for this album is 8.09 out of 10. This is a solid recommendation from those who want a more eclectic take on metalcore post-hardcore, and is a very fun album throughout. And with that, thank you all for watching, have a nice day, and goodbye!